So brought all this plan up. Cheney said, okay, go ahead with it. And there was a grudging, well, he's a saint, if that's what he wants to do, fine, dang it.
This was on the part of the other chiefs of staff.
Yeah. They didn't like it. Nobody liked it.
But they
But they bought in. So I was going to say now, we took November, we took the people leaving November, they left November. We took December, January, and February, and rolled it back into late November, early December. That then said that anybody thought they were going to leave during that period of time, push their families back, move during the Christmas period, and be sent with their kids to go to school in January. So they would be in the new school district. We got the cooperation of the Dodge schoolmaster down there to give them their final exams and all that kind of stuff, so they'd get a clean semester break. So then we had the March, April, and May people, and we rolled them all into mid to late December. And they too would be home by Christmas. They would be a little bit discombobulated because they would not finish their last semester there, and they would have to go in and pick up a little bit of repeat time if you looked at all schools being comparable in sort of the last semester. But that would essentially get everybody out who was in up through May, which May, June, normal school out time, and they would be gone by the end of December.
That would be about a third of the dependents that you had.
No, because this is only a period of 6 months on a 3-year tour.
3-year tour, so maybe about six of them. Yeah.
So since this created a tremendous
It's a lot
morale.
of work. Yeah.
Well, big morale problem. Meanwhile, I told us, maybe I not told you the story, but telling all of the tank managers take their units to the field, don't come back till you get them spruced up.
That was all the same time.
All this going on at the same time.
Right.
So it's a very busy and turbulent period of it.
Weren't any of the families frightened? Weren't any of them glad to get out of there?
Well, I was going to tell you. I went down to the first airplane that came in to take them out. A Mac charter. It's a DC-10. DC-10 has a very long nose you got to get up into. You don't see it when you're in an airport, but
Right.
you're standing on the tarmac, you got to climb a pretty good sized ladder to get up there. So I stood at the bottom of the airplane and I shook hands with every dependent that got on the airplane.
It's 300 people. Huh? That's
Yep.
awesome.
And I said to them, you know, I want to tell you that I know that I've discombobulated you. But this is too high risk an area. And they'd all been there and just seen all the bullets flying, whizzing around. And one lady had 2 sort of youngsters, I'd say, under the age of 7. And she threw her arms around me and she says, thank God you came and took care of it. You know, you're getting us out of here. So some of them are scared to death. So while that was a tough pill for a lot of people, I mean, think of the little stuff. You got to get transportation people to pack them up.
They are used to that much
Not that
density
surge
of people.
at once,
Yeah.
that's right. So, I mean, a big problem, you know, getting all that. But we started all that, and we were in the midst of all that, of course, when it turned out that the 20th was take them down day. But I don't resent making that decision. In other words, little kids and families shouldn't have been in that place at that particular time, because the level of harassment and uncertainty were of such magnitude that we were endangering the lives of innocent dependents. Yeah. So that commenced. Now, along about the 25th or 6th of November. All this is going on. Meanwhile, I'm flying down country, and the planning's going on, trying to run the drug war and deal with the ambassadors, get strategy right on that front, trying to sell the dependent withdrawal plan, all that. Lo and behold, right in the middle of the last part of November, a guy walks into the American Embassy and says that Noriega has permitted the Colombians to import car bombs, which will be used against American citizens in Panama and military installations. Now, at first blush, you might treat that in a cavalier manner. But when you are the sink, and you've been through the vice chief 4 years, you've been through 2 years straight out commander, and you have observed the kind of terrorist activity that went on in Germany during some period of the 80s. And then you have a connection with Noriega and his Colombian buddies, whom he also had a drug connection with. And you have a very aggressive drug program beginning to operate in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. And you look in the intelligence documents and you find that Noriega had employed as the G2 of the Panamanian Defense Force, the Guardia Nacional. He had employed bombs during the Carter to Rios treaty negotiations. Then, as a sink, when some guy comes in and says, we're going to blow up something here.
You flap your ears and listen, don't you?
You listen. So I said to my CIA, called my friendly CIA station chief in, so we didn't have an ambassador, we had a charge then. We by now changed. Got a change from, I think of his name there, I don't know his name, because he's sort of an interesting fellow. A guy named Bushnell came in to take it over. So I said, how reliable is this source? Well, it turns out the source was being handled by an FBI guy in Chicago. So the FBI guy in Chicago had put a source back into Panama. It turns out he had done that without notifying the FBI. And therefore he was illegally running this source out of country in hopes of breaking up a big narco ring in Chicago. So when we found, and when the FBI admitted that this guy was in fact a paid informant of the FBI, I then called for help. And I said, I need bomb sniffing dogs. Got a lot of installation control. I need more MPs. I need to bring in a substantial detachment of DEA guys, because this is a drug-related deal. So pretty soon down in Panama, we had the head of the FBI SWAT team. We had 100 bomb dogs in their handlers. And I had put the installations under a tight control system, so that every car that went through the gate had to be inspected. And Panamanian cars are not permitted to come through the gate.
And that included dog sniff, bomb sniff?
Yeah, full, look underneath the car and all that kind of stuff. Well, you can begin to understand that because the commissary was located in one installation, this began to get
Tedious.
burdensome and tedious. But I persisted until we could smoke out. Meanwhile, we're taking this guy and putting him on a polygraph, and DEA is doing interrogation. DEA is being sent out to look at the various Noriega points, see whether or not there's any activity going on in his remote locales. I recall one time they said a bunch of the narcs were coming in from Colombia, and they would be staying at a specific hotel. So I turned to the station chief and my own FBI or CIA guy, and I said, "Stake out that place and let's find out what's cooking." And the CIA guy, station chief, said, "We don't have anybody to stake it out." I said, "Listen here, you can tell we've been in this country for 80 years, and I don't have any people that I declare loyal to me as Panamanians to go stake out a place?" No. Because it tells you something about the state of human down there. So it ended up these two agents, the station chief and my guy, who's sort of a sync level guy, are out there doing stakeout. I mean, that's Mutt and Jeff shit. You know, it's a lapper, cats and jammer kids stuff. But they did it anyway, because I insisted they go do it. But pretty soon I had a team of about 10 or 12 DEA guys, a State Department detachment, had a big Army detachment down there, the counterintelligence guys and that kind of stuff. So we were running down a number of tracks. This is beginning also to grade on the population. Now, I said, for example, Panamanian cars are barred from entering a U.S. military installation. Well, it turns out that the hospital is built on a slope. It's outside of an installation, Gorgas Hospital was. It doesn't sit on a military installation. And it's built on stilts to accommodate the slope. All you have to do is drive into underneath the carports there and set off a car bomb, blame the whole hospital down. So I was determined that I would not permit a car bomb or whatever to blow up American people, because one is it would have been an embarrassment to the government of the United States of America, and to take it lightly would mean you would aid and abet those kind of guys if indeed they did exist. So if you talk to a guy like Colin Powell or Carl Bono at the time, they would say that was the great Thanksgiving car bomb caper. Now, meanwhile, during that particular caper, Steiner came down for a update on the plan, and so I activated him as the Joint Task Force commander without asking Colin Powell anything. Colin would later say in the commanders, you know, the least he could have done was ask me. Of course, that falls back under my
That's what happens when you hire
Rule
Thurman.
14, which is when in charge, take charge, and don't ask any question, the answer to which you would like, the answer would be to that, no, not hell, no, can't do that. So I just stood him up, because I knew, what I knew was going to come. I mean, that is, if one of those bombs went off, I knew what my president was going to do. You follow me? So from my perspective, although I couldn't talk like that, that said, I'm doing this because the president expects me to, the president knows shit about what I'm doing. I was content with the hassle that we put people up with in order to try to make sure that there was no stone left unturned in order to assure that we didn't have car bombs going on someplace and killing innocent American dependents and military as well. So this all began to squeeze up the level of frustration with dependents and that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, we started packing out. So I guess what if you come back and try to put a spin on this from a personnel standpoint, there are a couple of spins about it. One spin is that there is, and meanwhile I was using the SCM, the Southcom
Radio.
and television network, keep people, tell them what the hell we're doing about all this.
So you laid it right out that there's a car bomb danger?
Huh?
Did you lay it right out that there's a danger of car bombs?
Yeah. And of course Noriega then got up and denied it, which was fine, wanted to deny it, didn't want to say yes, but all this was, there's some more pressure on that being put on Noriega, so you blow up a car bomb, would blow your ass away. So one of the things to do is acknowledge it. And we did acknowledge it, and we used our newspaper, daily newspaper. And we knew the daily newspaper went off post. So I told the newspaper guy, print one page of news in Spanish. Unvarnished news off the ticker tape. So the Spanish people, see, all the newspapers are going over to the Noriega side, or else they close the son of bitches up and exiled the editors. So he had a captive press. He had a captive press, he had a captive legislature, he had a captive president. Everything was under his jurisdiction. But the pressure was coming up on the population of people there. And going through this large drill of removing people from the paradise that they had thought they were going to come to and shipping back to state became burdensome on families. But I tried to put the scheme together so it would minimize disruption of little kids going to school. It was going to create hardship in terms of being separated from your spouse for a while, but we came up with a way in which you graded on how much time you had been there and how much time you would have to serve, depending upon going back to a standard unaccompanied 2-year tour or a bachelor tour being 12 or 13 months. So we had everybody phased in. Very elaborate plan, very heavily worked by Army, Navy, and Air Force, Marine sub-elements about that, and then put together by my J1. But I guess one would say that it sounds like you're screwing over the troops, their families on the one hand. On the other hand, I'd say, no, my long-term view of having worked at Sedesper and kept involved with that both as a vice and the trade-out commanders, in other words, 8 or 10 years continuous service about that, made me highly sensitive to the families, and I tried to move the thing around so it would minimize impact on the family. And so the work that I believe that had gotten started with the first family symposium when I was at Desper, now it's 8 years later, and some of those tactics and techniques are being put into place, which says families are important. You have to take care of them and don't screw over them any more than you have to. So that's sort of meanwhile the planning's going on, meanwhile the drug work's going on, and that's sort of the temper of activities. We had a code system for closing downtown Panama, and once the bomb scam went on, I put a curfew on and put a squeeze play on people downtown. Couldn't be out, if you're an American, you couldn't be out of your house after 10 o'clock at night. So the number of incidents are now falling, because we're not out there in a place where you can get policed up. We are beginning to evaluate the kids and the parents. The level of tempo of activity in the training ranges is picking up, because I told all the battalion managers, go to the training range, don't come back until you fired all your weapons, infantry, armor, artillery, gunship, C-130 gunship, all that kind of stuff in the impact area, and do live fire maneuver from the squad to the battalion level. Pretty high tempo time, October, November, December, on all fronts.
What was the nature of the combat assets that you had?
Well, I had 3 battalions of light infantry, one of which was a parachute battalion. I had a special forces battalion. I had a Marine battalion. I had a brigade out of the 7th infantry division, which had a brigade headquarters and 2 battalions.
And that was actually there?
Yeah, they
They-
were north of Cologne.
Were they rotated through?
Yeah. I had a battalion in the Joint Jungle Operations Training Center.
They were rotating also, right?
Yeah.
They'd come.
So they'd be up there for 30 days.
Did they stay longer than that?
No, when they got through the 30 days, but they had a mission.
Yeah. While
In
they were
fact, the
there.
mission while they were in there, one of the units was in there when I was scheduled to graduate like the 23rd or something. But on the 20th, they went to combat. And so while they did not get their jungle operations badge, they got a CIB instead, combat infantry badge. And I was pinning this on the battalion commander, and I said, I know it makes you mad not to get your jungle operations training badge, but will this do instead? And he said, I think the troops know the difference. And then I had a mechanized battalion from the 5th Mech Division. Again, they rotated in and out. They had Bradley fighting barrels. So, he didn't have Bradleys, he had 103s. So we had a pretty, let's see, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4 is in 10 battalions.
And were there service component commanders and staffs
Yeah.
there also? How
There's
many?
a Marine colonel and his staff, there's a rear admiral in the Navy and his staff. There's an Air Force brigadier general who was the advanced CP of the 12th Air Force, which is located at Bergstrom Air Force Base, which was commanded by a 12th Air Force commanded by a lieutenant general.
And was there an Army?
Major general named Cisneros.
Okay, so that he was
He's called the U.S. Army South.
U.S. Army South, and he had a brigade commander under him.
Yeah.
And then was the brigade of the 7th Infantry Division also under him temporarily, or attached to him?
Yeah,
But he was not going to be the warfighting guy.
he was not. Steiner was going to be. He originally was going to be a warfighter.
So what was his role vis-a-vis compared to Steiner? When,
Deputy dog.
okay.
And played a very vital role in commanding the in-country units. And Steiner was bringing in the out-country units and commanding both. So it ended up Steiner would command this big task force. He broke it into about 4 areas. And Cisneros had part of it. Jimmy Johnson, who was the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, had a part of it. Carmen Cabeza, who had part of it, was 7th ID commander. Marines had a part of it. So it broke it down into several sectors, so that the major general was in charge of that group. Had a high leader-to-lead ratio there. So at the time of the fight, we started out, we had about, as I recall, 16,000 people. We brought in another 11,000, total 27,000. Okay, so now the month of November is on. Soon as the great bomb scam goes, Steiner begins to rehearse all the operations in the middle of the night. So pretty soon helicopters flying around in the middle of the night. Flares going off in the range in the middle of the night. School at Howard was almost an exact replica of the grammar school at Howard. It was about the same size, shape, and dimensionality of the place where this guy was going to be, where we were going to rescue him. So they practiced that at night. Practiced air holes. Flew out and did reconnaissance on the outlying units at night. So pretty high-level night activity. So I came under a court order for arrest. because I was going to be arrested and charged with disturbing the peace, which I was doing. But one of the things that happened in all that became a huge deception point. Pretty soon we flew so much at night, did so much activity at night that the Panamanians didn't know whether we had something really cooked up or not. Now Noriega is becoming increasingly frustrated by all of this high tempo ops since the arrival of this new flaky general. And along about the 15th of December, he gets up in front of his National Congress called the Assembly, all of whom he appointed. And in a very long speech, he rails against the U.S. And says that there is a declared state of war between the Panamanians and the U.S., not the other way around. And the Assembly then voted him to be the maximum leader, El Supremo Jefe. And as such, he would have all the powers of decree powers that would go on about that. And his job was to protect the Republic and make sure he drove out all the gringos over in there. And one of his taglines on that thing is, we shall see our enemies floating down the canal. So on the 17th of December, when one of our guys gets lost with 3 other guys in the car with him, a Panamanian Defense Force guy lets him have one with a rifle, and the guy is killed. That's Lieutenant Paz.
Right.
Of the U.S. Marine Corps.
Was he on a mission of any sort, or was he?
No, in fact, they were going downtown for dinner. We'll take a break here and hit the head here a minute. So, with the shooting of Lieutenant Paz, the fight is on. And those are well chronicled now.
Right.
He talked about that. Now, a sad note. With all of our care and attention trying to get defendants out and make it as smooth as possible, a guy comes up to me about day 3 in the operation, my desk log, my J4 that just sits there. And he says, got a bad story. And I said, what's the bad story? He said, well, we've got 250 defendants, or 300, or 500, or whatever that number was, for the number of people leaving at the tail end of, or the first 3 weeks of December. So all their property has is gone. And I said, say what? He said, all the property had been moved in vans to a transshipment point at on the Colon side, the north side, waiting the arrival of a freight ship, container ship, to take it to the United States. And he said, we didn't guard it when the takedown started, and Panamanians went in there and looted it all. I said, you just gotta be shitting me. So we had an infantry battalion 1 mile away.
Hold on, yes.
So I mean, there's no problem about doing that. If he just told me I got 500 carloads of shit, that have to be guarded. So there's a group of 500 dependent families that are in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine around here somewhere that think I'm the biggest shit that ever lived, because all of their property disappeared. Panamanians stole it. I mean, it didn't get blown away in the war.
No, just looted, right?
Just looted. I mean, everything. I went up there and looked at it. It's a sickening sight. All these connexes that were containers that were packed to go to the United States, wide open, and a few this and a few that spluttering through this wide number of guys. Shocking, but it tells you something about attention to detail and all that. You know, maybe had we had another month to work on the plan, we'd been better at that, but at that moment, nobody had thought to say, we got a new site. We had 27 sites to take down, but we had another 27 or 30 of them we had to guard, or more, because they were all kind of vital points along the canal that had to make sure that they get the right amount of attention about that. So that could have just been one more and been a piece of cake to do it, but no, you know, it's one of those things nobody reported up the line about having to take care of. And some commander down below wasn't smart enough to raise it, and thus we lost an extreme amount of property. So what we thought was going to be a smooth exodus wasn't.
Did the families keep going out after the?
No, we stopped that.
Did any come back?
It's over.
Yeah.
No, we let some come back, but not many. But we stopped it.
So it is a long tour area now still?
It is. I think they're getting ready to go through a different deal, which was turn it into a short tour area now, but I'm not sure about that. I think that's the case. From a family point of view, you understand the fight actually got into the front yards of families.
I understand that.
On Amador, half of Amador had been turned over to the Panamanians. It was occupied by a fairly high-quality Panamanian force and company. And so we thought we would do a air mobile assault into Amador, which we did. And that by a show of force and by using a lot of loudspeakers, we'd fire some warning shots, talk to them in loudspeaker, give up their weapons. But surprisingly, they did not do that. And so, for example, one of the wives later told me she was in there baking cookies on the morning of the 20th to take out the troops who were in their front yards who were firing across the green sward.
Right across the parade ground, wasn't it?
That's right.
PDF on one side and dependent housing on the other?
But I mean, the whole notion of somebody's in the kitchen in the same battlefield and is making cookies for the troops, I mean, it's an interesting notion. Not since the stockade days on the Western Plain have we seen such an action like that, where families were directly involved in the war. Now, obviously, as things went on, there was a significant amount of looting downtown. But we stopped the defendants going out and said we'll freeze everybody in tracks. And anybody who wants to leave may do that. I mean, if you've already made your plans, you bought a house, or you've decided enough of this is enough, and we're getting out of here, because there have been some on-offs and all that. And we let those who want to go ahead and take advantage on day home. Many have elected to stay and have stayed since. So from a how does personnel fit into this kaleidoscope we've been talking about in the Southcom instance? I think one is substantial amount of quality of force comes to being here. The seventh ID, the reorganization of creating the world's finest light infantry, comes to be here, and able to be hastily moved from its dispositions up north down to a contingency area where they were employed very successfully. The quality of the people who manned Gorgas Hospital, for example. Terrific doctors, Panamanian nurses came over there. They took care of Panamanians and Americans alike. Discipline of the troops, extraordinarily high discipline. We had a couple of incidents there, both of which resulted in court-martial activity. One where a guy shot a woman. He was either coming in or going out of a brothel. They saw a woman, for some reason or other, shot her. One at the 82nd Airborne Division, where a sergeant had seen several of those people get ambushed, and when a bunch of guys came along and opened fire, he opened fire and cleaned out the lot of them. He stood trial down at Fort Bragg and was acquitted. So I'd say that there's an editorial in the Army Times that I think puts all that in perspective. I don't really copy that or not. It's sort of when I turn in with leukemia. It talks about, he had something to do with recruiting them, and he had something to do with equipping them, because we used the Black Hawk here, and we used the Apache here. He had something to do with training him, and now he's employing him in a combat operation.
This is why that's why I picked you.
And that's pretty well summarized, I think, in the Army Times editorial. So I'll leave it to them. You can read that and think what you like about it. Now, one of the things I did after the fracas took place, and again, I think this is because of my proclivity for trying to get, quote, people, unquote, into the act. I took a Southcom flag. No, that's not right. I did have a difference there, but I took a battle streamer for Panama. And then I took photos of the Apache and photos of the Black Hawk, and took them to the factories and presented them with the streamer. It's all framed, and presented that to the workers in the factory for having produced high quality equipment which American troops had used in combat. And interestingly enough, I told that to Bill Tuttle, who was commander of the Army Material Command after I'd retired, and this was after Desert Shield. He did the same thing at Desert Storm. Went back and were like down to Loral Vought, where the ATACMS missile had been used, or the MLRS went down and did a big streamer on them. Gave a notion that their equipment had fought, or went to the Raytheon plant in Massachusetts to do the same. But all of that was trying to stimulate a pride in the civilian workforce who had manufactured these impedimenta of war, to give them some notion that we appreciated what it was we did, aggrandize them for, defense team. So, from a personnel standpoint, that's sort of the Panama story.
How did Purple Storm operations differ from San Cleese?
No particular difference.
No, just another name for the same operation. There was a big fire in Barrio. Did you have information on how that got started?
Yeah, there are two beliefs about that. One belief is that we deliberately started. We didn't deliberately start any fires for anybody. And the second is a Catholic priest reported to us that that was set by members of the Dobermans, which is one of the command.
Will you call General Merritt now?
Sure.
Can you do
upstairs?
that? He's up there right now.
Okay.
He said, I got a copy.
Okay. So, Catholic priests lived in the things that were started by the Dobermans.
Were the Dobermans a dignity battalion?
Yeah, a first-class dignity battalion.
And Did he have any idea what their purpose was?
Well, one of the purposes was to bring ill repute on the Americans. Lay it off on the Americans.
From interview, well, I'll ask you these questions. We were talking about the Dobermans and the fire in the barrio. And you said that one reason they might have, or actually did start it, was to discredit the Americans.
Yeah, the other account clearly is that it was actually, using tracers or whatever else to designate. It really was a barrio with, and the commandancia was sitting in
Right.
close proximity to it, and the commandancia was taken apart with C-130 gunships by Sheridans, and several Hellfire rounds were fired in the vicinity of Apaches.
Were there...
There were no there's no artillery fired there, no.
Yes. My understanding, the only artillery shells fired anywhere near Panama City were a couple of demonstration rounds fired into an empty building at Fort Amador. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
There were no aerial bombs dropped anywhere except
Way out at
way out.
Rio Hatta,
Rio Hatta, yes.
50 miles out.
And were there shacks and shanties and so forth built up against the walls of the Comandancia?
No.
There was a clear area around it.
Yeah.
We talked to quite a large number of soldiers who participated in the various actions, and none of them described fights with dignity battalions. They all reported that they were engaged with Panamanian Defense Force companies. So I was wondering I've never had an idea of what happened. I mean, none of the books even talk about the dignity battalion. Did they just dissolve? Or did they...
I think there was some sniping with those guys. And we had snipers all through
All over
the frigates. I was standing in front of the assembly building. On the 20th, and a drive-by car drove by and hosed down the area. Now, whether they are Panamanian Defense Force people, whether they're dignity, but they're all in civilian clothes, hard to tell. So I think if you sort of look at the taxonomy of who was in the fight, you had Panamanian Defense Forces in uniform, and you had Panamanian Defense Forces not in uniform, and you had dignity battalions not in uniform. So you had a potpourri of people, and my notion is that there were some dignity battalion people who picked up several thousand people, some of whom's only and put them in detention while we screened them as EPWs.
What's an EPW?
Enemy prisoner of war.
Okay.
And so when you talk to troops and say, who did you fight against, I think the natural proclivity would be anybody that returned fire against us or was in uniform, obviously as PDF, but I would also say to you that a large number of PDFers were in uniform. And then the question would come as, well, did the dignity battalions infiltrate the mixture with all that? And my impression would be that they did. But I wouldn't begrudge. I mean, they were there at the shooting end, and they know more about it than I do.
Right. Well, I was just wondering if the G2 reported that there was close integration between the digbats and the
There were
regular
centers of excellence of digbats. For example, immediately west of Howard Airfield was a town which was infiltrated full of dignity battalion people. The Deputy Battalion people gave us a fit at Gorgas one day during the famous bomb caper. They came up there and they wouldn't let it park, then they came up with a demonstration. And so I conducted a counter demonstration by running over some armored personnel carriers to clean them out. Because they weren't going to get up underneath my Gorgas hospital under the quote auspices of the famous bomb caper. So there were pockets of Dignity Battalion people, yes, because they were geographically oriented,
I see. Sort of a
organized around the centers of mass population, as opposed to saying the guys on the west side of town fought on, were in Dignity Battalions on the east side.
Well, the people that we talked to described their initial combat missions as being to take down certain specific units. And none of these were did they describe as Dignity Battalions. They were all described.
No, we didn't orient on Dignity Battalion as a target.
Mhm.
We oriented on PDF
Right.
regular units and police units. And their centers of mass in terms of their property holdings. And then orient on the force themselves. In order to force move, orient on where the moving force is.
So that after they were taken down, did the Dignity Battalions more or less evaporate, disappear? Or, none of them, I gather,
Well,
went into
there were
guerrillas.
sporadic, the objectives were all seized about by 1700, the afternoon of the 20th. However, there was a spattering of sniper activity and that kind of stuff for several days thereafter, and looting and all that kind of stuff went on for several days thereafter. So there was a